Matthew McConkey joins me today. Welcome, Matthew. Good to see you.
Hey Doc, how are you?
Great, great. Thanks for taking the time today to join me.
Thanks for having me because it's been awesome. I mean, it's talking to you for the last year and a half. We met through social media, and I really consider you a friend of mine. And even though we've never met, I'm like I've always got a really good back and forth with you on social.
Yeah, same here. I feel like I've known you forever. Long lost friend.
It in flames, man.
Yeah, great to connect and get a chance to really talk about your work. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
I have some big questions about your books, and so really happy that you took this time. First, I think before we even get into any of the books, I want to ask the biggest question is how in the world did you learn how to write like this?
Where I got started in writing, I was probably about 12 years old, and there was um, a series of young adult horror stuff that came out by J.B. Stamper, Judith Bauer Stamper, and they were called Tales from the Midnight Hour. And when I would get those books, I would read them, and it was like reading kid versions of Tales from the Crypt. And I was like, man, I was just really impressed with her writing. And I was like, I want to write like this one day. And I hate reading. I do not like reading at all. Can't stand it because it's like I'm always critiquing the other writers. So I learned a lot how to formulate stories at a 12-year-old mind through how she was doing it because I would go through and rewrite everything that she would do and add my stuff to it. Yeah. But as I got older, probably about 15 or 16 years old, I started getting into Stephen King and started reading him. But the thing about King was a lot of his stuff was so over my head because he's writing at 35, 40 years old, and I'm 15 trying to identify with adult themes like alcoholism, divorce and stuff like that. Depression. I didn't get some of that stuff. So it kind of went over my head. But I was able to figure out in King's writing what I didn't like. And what I didn't like is he falls in love with his descriptions a lot. And I was like, if I ever become a writer, I'm not going to do that because I want everything to be really linear. So I was really those two writers really influenced my writing. But what influenced me probably more was films. Growing up watching movies, going to the movies, because I'm like, people will watch a movie quicker before they will read a book. So if you can make a book flow like a movie, you can get people to read it, and that's exactly what I try to do. I try to write very cinematically to where when you open that book, everything should flow just like the movie. And I had a lady from Seattle who had messaged me on the very first book, and she said, "I really loved your book. It felt like a movie." And I was like, "That's exactly what I wanted." And ever since then, I've been able to do that. So films really influenced me, but Stamper and King influenced the style, I guess you could say, on how I write.
Wow, I do see the cinematic quality in your books. I think I put that in one of your reviews as well. I really do. It does feel like a film. I think you'd probably hate Victorian literature that's like overly flowery description.
Oh
It goes
man,
on 800 pages of
yes, and I
that's
can't do it
a
because I think, especially in age, you can't get you got to grab people's attention. And that was the thing about it when Home Again came out. My editor looked at it, and she was like, "This is a really good book, but it's boring as hell." And I said, "Then how are we going to fix that?" Because I'm thinking we're going to have to rewrite every bit of it, change stuff around. And this is where I learned a very valuable piece of information. She said, "You're going to have a hook because you don't have the benefit of a King or a Dean Koontz or a Grissom where they know the brand name, so they're going to keep going, even though it's kind of boring at first. They're going to get to it." She said, "You're going to have a hook." And when she told me about that, how to hook the reader in the first few paragraphs, it changed the complexion of that first novel. Because then I saw what she was talking about. Because when you read the first draft of the, or that later draft of the first novel, It is very boring because the narrator is just going through talking about his life. Well, okay, that's boring. I didn't realize it, but she made a suggestion to where you take an element of the last third of the book and move it to the front to where he kills the kid out in the street after the football game. She says, because now you've established there's something really going on here. Now we got to follow you through the rest of the book to get there. And the novels really, I've written 3 novels and I've formulated them all like that to get the shock value to get you to come with me in those first few paragraphs, which is something I didn't even think about because I thought when you wrote novels you had to go from point A to B, C, D, on further down. But realistically, you can just flip it around and grab you by the collar and say, "Let's go." And that's what I learned from my first editor.
So you basically resequenced that book in time. Is that all? Is that what really took the
Pretty
hooks?
much, yeah, pretty much because you want to get the reader involved pretty quickly, because especially in this day and age where everybody seems to have an attention deficit.
Yeah.
If they can't grab it in the first 15, 20 seconds, they put it down. They don't want to do it anymore. You've got to be able to catch them. And I think that not just for me, but I think a lot of other writers that are coming up, whether they're traditionally published or not, there's a lot of them that are having a hard time grabbing people unless you're a brand name. And that's getting harder and harder to do. Even online, if you look at online magazines and read the articles, they're telling you ahead of time, hey, this is a 2-minute read to lower the anxiety off of people, because a lot of younger people, when they start reading articles or they click onto it, they don't want to read something that's going to take 5 or 6 minutes. So you got to try to compress as much information down in about 1.5, 2 minutes to let them know, hey, it's a 2-minute read, so you can be out here real quick. And that's
Wow.
what a lot of people are wanting now.
Yeah, that's the fight. That's the struggle that writers have. So, whew, wow. It'd be interesting to see what the age demographics of your readers are. I know it's kind of hard to see the data on those kinds of things, but
It is, but the people that contact me are the ones that are our age and older.
okay. Older.
Younger,
Yeah.
yeah, younger will buy it just because of the novelty of it.
Okay.
They know me. They're like, "Oh, hey, I really want this. Can you sign it?" Yeah, great, and that's it. I don't really think the younger crowd reads it
Oh
because
no.
a lot of people say, "Well, if it was a movie, I'd watch it."
Oh, even I think even getting them to watch a full movie is difficult because I think we're in such a culture now of miniseries. So
Oh,
just
you're
even
100%.
structuring it as a movie, marketing it, you could do the same thing but split it up, and they'd watch it like that, back to back episodes. But it's the psychology behind it. It's too stretched out, I guess,
Yeah,
as a single movie.
I don't know if this generation now could be patient enough to watch a Harry Potter series.
Yeah.
You take the 8 films of Harry Potter. I don't know if they could. I don't know if they would have the patience to do it. We were at the theater watching the new Ghostbusters movie, and everybody, I would look around, and you had probably about 80% of the people that were just scrolling through their phones. It's not that it
No
was a bad
way. In a live movie?
and
Oh, that's terrible.
I've seen it in different movie theaters too. So it wasn't just Ghostbusters. I think people have become so engrossed in their phones that it takes precedent over everything, because they're thinking they're multitasking because they're listening to it in the background and they're doing whatever they want to do. We've all been conditioned by our phone, and that sucks because we're missing stuff. When
Yeah, a
probably
lot, a lot.
2000 back, we weren't missing anything. We
No.
were able to keep our head up, but now we're down and there's so much stuff flying over our heads because our heads are down looking at this. I don't know. It's scary to me.
Anyone born after that time period, the new generation has no idea how to live the way that we live. Pre
No,
2000, pre cell phone. There's
no,
just
because I remember back when we were growing up, you would have to go to the library and go get encyclopedias and go through the index cards to find the books, to do the research. Now, I mean, you've got Google, and now AI has really taken off. And man, I don't. It's a different ball game now than what it was when you and I were coming up, for sure.
Yeah. That's concerning. I've even seen the cell phones, like you said, at concerts where they're just checked out. They're looking at the phones instead of the
It
art
is,
band that's playing on the stage. What? It's a concert.
yeah.
And
You
sometimes artists will yell out, "Put that phone away!" Or I've seen that too. They get some of them get pretty angry over it.
They do. I've seen that happen too. I've seen TikTok footage of that stuff, and so
Yeah.
I'm good about it. But because when you go to a concert, you're supposed to just enjoy it, But I think just like with the theater, just like with concerts, everybody's got their phone now, and I don't know, the attention span has really diminished by the decades. And I think the phone and the way we get our information now is so quick. Man, it takes nothing to just sit there and just scroll through your phone now, even if somebody's talking to you.
Yeah.
If somebody's talking, I've been in meetings before where they're talking and somebody's got their phone right underneath their table looking, and I'm like, man, come on,
Yeah.
let's don't.
Yeah. We all see it. It's
We
wild.
do. It's craziness.
Yeah.
I don't know if it stops though. I don't think it does. I think it's like AI. I think when you open that door, you can't shut it. It's already open. Can't walk it back.
Yeah. Yeah. You may be right. There comes a point where we're just plugged in, and it's
Did you ever think we'd be like that though?
no. I had no. If I think about it now, I had no no concept of what this present world is was going to be about. No, no, I
No.
couldn't predict that. No.
No, I was talking to my grandfather. He's 90 years old, and
Oh wow.
he was talking about stuff that he had seen. And of course, he doesn't understand phones and he doesn't understand smart TVs and stuff like that. I mean, which he shouldn't. I mean, he's 90 years old. I mean, he's to the point where, that's why people like me take care of his stuff if we need to, like, hey, you want to pay your bill online? No, I'd rather go down there. Okay. I would just pay it online because that's exactly what they're going to do through their system. So, but he's stuck in the old ways, and he can be because he's 90 years old. What he doesn't need to learn anything new.
No, what do you do right at that age? It's
Right. But me and you, we have to stay on top because we're going to be supplanting the baby boomers soon. And we've got to really stay on top because if we are fortunate enough to live another 20 years, we've really got to know what's going on with technology, and it changes so fast. But you look at where we're at now versus where we're 10 years from now or 10 years ago. It's crazy. Sometimes it messes with me. I've got to set up a new smart TV today. I don't know. We'll see. Because the one I just took down off the wall has been on that wall for like 17 years now.
wow.
So I don't know. We're going to find out.
Yeah, that's it's frightening. It's there's a lot to consider, I think, going forward.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. But I think as far as writing, I don't know if writing's a lost art, but I definitely think that it's. I've got friends who speed read right now and are reading these best-selling books. Are about maybe 230 pages. There's not a lot of substance in it, and they're just speed reading it. And I'm like, how are you reading 50 books up to this point when you started January 1st up to now?
Wow. Yeah.
I question that.
Yeah. That's
Because do you think they're getting all of what the author is intending when they're speed reading
no,
like that?
probably not. And I admit I've done it too. I mean, I've done it at times if it's something if it's something I feel like I'm not really enjoying, and if I feel like I need to get through something, I just need to read it for some reason. I do have those needs, I guess. I feel like there's a book I need to know about, and I
Mm,
want to get a feel for it. But then, I'm missing a lot, and I'm not really truly enjoying it. The books I want to read, I will take that time, and if I'm really truly enjoying it, then it pulls me in, and that's it. But yeah, that's again, it's the attention span maybe, and
It has to be because it's just, and it sucks because you sit there and you as a writer, I want you to get as much as you possibly can out of every paragraph I write,
yeah,
and because there's a lot that goes into that. But if you're speed reading me, you're going to miss a lot of soul into what I'm doing, and I really worry about that. Not just with my writing, but with everybody else's writing. So I try to write when I start a book or a story or whatever. I try to write as an audience of one because if I like it, then there's going to be other people that like it, and I never really consider who's going to be reading it because they may be speed reading me, or they may not like the subject I'm writing about or whatever. But as long as I feel good about it, I'll keep writing it, and I feel really good after it's published. I don't really consider if their attention span is going to be enough to keep reading the book. I hope it is because I love talking about the style, what the characters were going through, the substance of the book. And there's some people I've ran into, they want to talk about the book, but I don't think they've read the book. I can tell they've went through it, but I don't think they've read it. I don't think they felt it. And I
yeah,
think that's got to
you
do
can
with the
tell,
attention.
right? It's
I think you can. I really do. I really think you can because it's like there's emotions you hope you evoke out of people. And not everybody's going to have the same emotional response as you did to a certain scene because it might not resonate with them the same way it did with me or with someone else. But you can always tell when you're talking to somebody if they've really read it and got what it's about. And I maybe have ran into about 4 or 5 people where they've really fully gotten what the story was about.
wow, wow. That's yeah, that's
Kind of sucks in a way because you're
yeah,
like,
yeah. We're yeah. It's
mm,
funny because you said maybe like a lost art. One of the college papers I wrote in, I think it was the last year of my bachelor's in English was on, I wrote this really controversial essay for a class on the future of literature. And I think my professor just hated
yeah,
it. He hated it because I predicted the kind of the end of novels, like that nobody would read novels anymore. and
you're
and
not
at the
far
time
off.
I was really into short fiction at the time, like really minimalist stuff
Right.
and poetry as well. And I had already gotten through really tough Victorian novels, and those longer, that was a dreadful class for me. It was just really really difficult. And I gravitated toward the British romantic poetry, which was the period earlier. And then I got into the more modern stuff and the more of the American literature that was really simple to the point. And some of the writers could do a little bit of both of that. Like Hemingway could write these long, long novels that I don't want anything to do with.
Right.
So there's a few of them that are on my list to read just because I feel like I need to read them. But like, whoa, and I still haven't read them. But then he's got this short fiction that's really to the point. And so it's like,
Yeah.
wow, and it's short sentences, really minimalist. I loved
Yep.
Raymond Carver for that reason and he didn't write
Hmm.
any novels. He was all short fiction, a little bit of poetry. And
Yeah.
so that was like my prediction back then, but it's now as many years later and it's still going, but I don't know where where it's going to go.
But I don't think you're far off though. I think they still write novels, but I don't think they're being read as often.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to read it, you're reading more shorter stuff like you were talking about, because I think people like a shorter way to get there. Because
Novellas.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
go to a bookstore and you see, let's say Stephen King's Insomnia, for example, I mean, that's a thick book. It's going to turn a lot of people off when they can go and look at a one off of Poe's Telltale Heart, which is not that thick at all, but it's a short story. And they're going to say, if I want to read something and I've got to read something, let's take the short version here.
Yeah. And if I could read three or four pieces in the time it takes me to read one, that's another choice people are going to make as well. So that's got
Yeah,
to be a tough sell having a 400-page, 500-page novel these days. I mean,
I don't want to do it. I mean,
no, I don't know.
I try to keep everything about 110,000 words or under because I
Yeah,
think you can tell a story, a really good story with meat on it in about 100,000 words. I think if
yeah.
you go into 150,000, 160,000, I think you're doing it. I really think that's just vanity because I
You're
don't think you.
describing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I've seen other writers. I've read other writers, and I'm like, wow, you could have really took 250, 300 pages out of here, and it wouldn't have affected the story at all.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
I've helped some people with manuscripts. I helped one guy do a book some years ago, and he had that issue where it was like, here's the day I was born, here I am now. I'm in my 60s, and it was like from birth all the way up in chronological order, and it was like, oh my goodness, nobody's going to get through this. They're going to give up on day one, and so we cut it up like you were saying with your first book. We took them getting off the helicopter in Vietnam during the
Yeah,
war. And that was the first scene of the book. I mean, that was we cut right there. We cut it all up. We took about 150 pages out, and I don't know if he did something else with that at some point.
right.
Maybe it was a memoir, so it ended up
Mhm.
to be a great book and it was an
Yeah,
enjoyable read. But yeah, it needed that fix, especially for the times.
yeah.
So
Sometimes you get a book, and it's like with Home Again. I wasn't really sure. I thought it was good, but when you let somebody else read it that knows what they're talking about, and they're like, you really need to change this and this, you need to listen to that because they're trying to help you. And a lot of people, a lot of writers, they get too hurt and they'll say, well, I'm not changing it. I'm open to it because if a scene doesn't work right, and if you ask multiple people and they say the same thing, five people can't be wrong about one thing.
it's a good point. Yeah.
Typically, when they're reading the same, if they get the same vibe and they don't meet, and they're saying, okay, this scene didn't make sense. Okay, well, that's what Joe said, and that's what Sharon said too. So maybe there's something wrong with that scene. Maybe it needs to be reworked, taken out, something in its place, something. So as a writer, you've really got to listen to some people because they may be right.
Now, there are those people that love that overly descriptive literary fiction, they'll call it, and they love that, and it's really more about the language to them than it is the story. Now, they say they love that. I don't know that they read everything that they have in front of them, because that's a lot of time that when you have longer pieces like that to dedicate to. But so I think if you showed something like that to five of those people, they might say, no, this isn't, it is not descriptive enough. It doesn't go.
Right. Yeah.
The problem with that is that you might have really good stories, you might have really good books that then get rejected, or they're not looked at, or they're criticized for not being literary enough in
Right.
that sense. But I feel like there's still a good story. They're actually a better story. There's more of a story there. I tend to value the story more than the language itself. That's more, the story it's telling is more important to me.
If it exactly right, because if the story can flow and you feel like you're there and you feel you can identify with the characters and the situations, that's really what counts. I think. I don't think you have to be, I don't think you have to weave sentences, to where they're just like literary masterpieces because everybody's going to take a different take off the book and everybody's going to like the book for different reasons. So I think just reading a book and depending on how you take it, you can be like, man, this is a really good book, for this reason. And somebody else may say, well, I agree with that, but here's why I liked it. Sometimes some of the best books I've read are not literary masterpieces. I go back and sometimes reread those old J.B. Stamper books, and they weren't the greatest, but the demographic was for children and preteens. And every time I read those books, I'm just like, man, these are really good. And it's not nostalgia, it's just that she was able to get you from point A to point B in a quick amount of time, and you paint the picture inside your mind with the words that she gives you, whether they were limited or not.
That's the thing. That's the thing. It's you're letting the reader fill those blanks in where I think a lot of other fiction more and not always commercial, like maybe the big I think some of the big commercial fiction maybe does some of that,
Yeah.
but I think more of the highly regarded award-winning fiction is not doing that. It's giving you too much detail.
Yeah, because I think it's that elitist mindset to where they want you to sound so different. I had an experience with a guy several years ago. Uh, I ran in. He had found me where I worked, which was scary enough. But he was a 6'7" biker who had just came back from Sturgis, and he was on his way to Florida. And keep in mind, I wasn't on social media at this point, and he found me.
How did he found you? He looked you up
He,
and paid you a
he
visit.
yeah. So we're talking, and he says, "Hey," he says, "You're Matthew McConkey, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "I just want you to know that we had your book at Sturgis. My club did." I was like, "Wow, okay." He goes, and he hits me on the arm, and he says, "Thanks for not sounding like one of them." And he turns and walks away, and I'm like, "How did you find me?" And he says, "We can find anybody."
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
true story. And he was going back to Florida because he had told me he was on his route back to Florida and he wanted to stop through. And that scared me because I'm like, how does this guy know? How does he know? And that freaked me out a little bit.
You
Like,
never know who's reading your books, right? You just never
I
know.
never knew a biker gang was reading my books, but that was really good because the connotation was I didn't sound like them. That was really cool because I can write elitist stuff. I don't want to because the people I write for are the people. If I'm going, I write books I want to read, but I can't find books out there really that match what I'm doing. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I'm always. I think sometimes you get writers who get published in the big mainstream. The publishers and the editors are like, well, maybe you need to sound just a little bit like this. We're going to fine tune it a little bit. Well, then you take the voice completely out. And I want an authentic voice because I write about the South, people who grew up working in textile mills and, cutting tobacco out in the fields, farming and stuff like that. I mean, my main characters, they're teachers because I think teachers are just the salt of the earth people that we got to have. They're important as farmers, because you're growing children, you're growing their
Yeah.
knowledge. But there's some books where the main characters are like neuroscientists or, all this, astrophysicists, and you can't relate to that. Normal people can't relate to that. So I don't want to write something I can't relate to or I didn't see or that I didn't grow up in. So I think a lot of that, I think when you're a writer, you've got to have those experiences. And if you can't have those experiences, you need to listen to stories from real people so you can absorb those experiences from them and then write about it. I
I
mean,
can
that's
relate.
what
I can relate. That's
you,
what I
you
like about Raymond Carver is, the common person, working
yeah,
class, really normal everyday issues that are captured and
yeah,
captured really closely, right to the point. No wasted time. I just rewatched, we were talking about cinema. I just
mm,
rewatched The Joker. And I realized the
yeah.
second, when you watch a movie the second time, you always see things you didn't see the first time. So if you're like
Oh,
us and you watch things and you watch for that, and you're not
yeah,
on your phone at the same time. But
right,
I
yeah,
realized the second time that, there's not a moment wasted in that film. Like it's a cinematic masterpiece. Like
yeah,
every second of the film, there's something for you to look at.
yeah,
No, and you see that in movies too, where they'll spend a lot of time moving the camera around and it's a lot of wasted time. Maybe
yeah,
there's a reason for that too, but there's just a lot of long movies that that don't do what the Joker does, and other movies, minimalist movies.
Right. I mean, you look at Jaws. Jaws is one of my favorite films all time. And I don't know. I mean, Steven Spielberg has made great movies after Jaws, but there was just something about Jaws, just the way it's shot. It's three men against in the environment, and man against himself on the boat because they end up going against each other when Quinn starts busting the the radio. That movie, man, I could watch it. I've probably watched it 200 times, and I always see something different. And I'm like, whoa! It's like seeing it for the first time again when you see that
Yeah,
that little
yeah.
piece. You're like, oh no, I just saw
Look
that.
at that. Yeah, yeah.
See it in Scorsese's movies too, because I've watched Goodfellas just as many times, and I
Many
always see
times.
something in Goodfellas, and I'm like, God, that's such a masterpiece movie too.
Yeah, they hide things in there. So imagine, like, watching a movie like that and you're on your phone. You're missing so much. It's
We
it's
went to go see Oppenheimer last year.
and that was a long
Oppenheimer
movie. That
is
was a long
very
movie.
long, but fantastic,
Great. Well done. Yeah.
fantastic, right? And I remember walking, I remember walking out of the movie, and this kid who was probably about 17, 18 years old, he's like, I thought there were going to be more explosions. This movie sucked. And I was like, what?
He's just waiting for the bomb. That was
Right. And I'm like, man, this movie was, I think Oppenheimer and I think Three Billboards was probably I think they're the two best movies I've seen probably in the last 5 years. Have you seen Three
I
Billboards?
have not. No.
Fantastic.
I'll check
Sam
it
Rockwell,
out.
great. Woody
Nice.
Harrelson's great. Frances McDormand is great. Whole cast is great.
Oh yeah, they're great then. Yeah.
Oh yeah, those were the two best movies I've seen probably in the last 5 years. And I was like, man, if I could write a novel like Three Billboards, just to capture what I saw on film somehow, but capture that essence into a book, man, that'd be great. That's why I like watching movies a lot because I get really inspired because you got the directors who evoke that emotion in a 2 hour movie. And sometimes the characters only have 15 or 20 minutes screen time, but they're able to impact you so much that you're like, I want to write a character just like that and try to get that kind of emotion into the pages. And then when I wrote Maple Lane, which was the book about the uh, child that got ran over in the street. Okay, well, how does that affect the mother and the father? How does that affect the marriage? I was really interested in that because I've talked to a lot of people who've lost children, and they all have a common thing where it's they never have gotten over it, which you can't get over it. But my question was, how do you how do you make it through? How do you journey through that? And you see in that book, the main character, he does one thing, and his wife, she's doing another thing, and they just end up splitting apart because they can't coincide with each other anymore. They can't coexist. So I'm interested in human emotion a lot in my work, and I think I think Maple Lane is probably it's my favorite book. It's not my best one, but it's my favorite just because of the emotional toll that I put everybody in. And at the end of the book, when I ended it, I sat there at my desk and I was like, man, this really sucks. I hate that this happened. But it was good for the book and good for the characters. And I was really sad for a while. And I didn't know if I was going to keep the ending of it. But I was like, it really works. No matter how bad it is, it really works for that character's journey. So, but
You
I
had to
really
go.
like,
You had to stay with it.
yeah, human emotion stories, human emotion movies, stuff like where you can just feel it. That's what I'm interested in. And I love that.
So what was the first book you wrote?
Long time ago, man, God, I don't know. I had a lot of false starts. I wrote a book called Watershed that was kind of like Home Again, and it was just terrible. It was nothing like really what Home Again was like. And I thought I screwed up, and I was like, man, this book's terrible. I can't rewrite this book. Then I read a thing from Stephen King where he said a book is really never finished until the author is dead. You
Whoa.
can rewrite it. You can do
Yeah,
whatever
you
you want
could.
to because you've got it. It's yours. So I was like, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna take Watershed out and I'm gonna redo this. And I retitled it Home Again because it didn't sell anyway, so it ain't like anybody was. So I did that and I took it to an editor and I said, hey, what do you think? And they looked at it and they was like, we think you really got something here. And they's like, are you going to try to, get an agent? Or are you going to try to do, go through all the channels? I was like, no, I don't, because I would rather do it myself because I feel like I got more control over what I want. And I just hired an editor, hired a cover artist, formatter, all that. And I got like a little team that's
Yeah.
scattered across the country and they know my
Wow.
work. And, I say, hey, I got a new novel coming out. Let's assemble the Avengers. Let's go. And
At
and
what
that's
at what age were you when you wrote that first draft?
oh man, probably I want to say probably early 30s, maybe late 20s,
Okay.
maybe.
Did you think about writing at all in your 20s? Did you have any training? Did you take
Oh,
any
oh no.
classes?
I had been writing ever since I was 12 years old. I just never got
So,
anything going.
so stories, short
Right.
stories.
Yeah, because I would go after I started with JB Stamper stuff, and then I started creating my own work. And I'd actually written a novel when I was a junior in high school. I'd written a novel. I've still got it. I've written this novel 6 times, and I cannot get what it's about. If that makes sense, I've got it.
I have
I
one of
remember
those
writing.
too.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah,
frustrating because it's such a great
yeah.
story, but I can't figure it out, and it's
Like you
like
want to
my
bring it back to life and get it out there, but it's
yeah, it's almost impossible.
yeah.
I remember writing it on a I think it was an Underwood 315 typewriter
Wow.
that my uncle had got me from Chicago. This is probably early 90s. I didn't have a computer at the time, so what I would do in my house, I stacked a bunch of dictionaries on top and put the typewriter on top of it, and I just started clacking. And I ended up turning out a 450-page manuscript when I was junior in high school on this novel. So my friends read it, of course, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's so awesome!" And I'm like, "Great." But for years, and I'm talking decades, I have went back to that story, changed so much of it, and I still cannot get it right. It's just I can't figure it out. I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever publish it. I really don't, because what it is it centers around three dead kids at a nearby pond where they were camping the night before, and that's the plot. So it's a who done it basically, and I answered all the questions. Who done it, what the motives were, all this, that, and the other, but I wasn't satisfied with it. So I went back for a second draft, completely redid it. Didn't like that, shelved it. Would go back to it in my mid 20s. Didn't like it, shelved it. I've got a copy of it in my Chromebook now. I'm probably about 64, 65,000 words in, and I had to stop because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know.
Where is it going? What is it? Yeah. What is it become?
Exactly. The
Yeah.
problem with the problem with novels is you got to have the motivate. You got to have the momentum, because if you stop on a novel, you lose that momentum. And I've lost that momentum so many times on that novel. Um, I don't know. I was actually done with writing until I ran into your post a while back, because I was done
Done with
earlier this
writing?
year.
Like just
Yeah, just done. I was going to quit.
anything, really?
Yeah, done.
Oh,
Mostly fiction because I couldn't do it anymore. There was
wow.
a story that had came out. I had got a story and I could not figure it out. It's a great idea. It's a short story. And I started writing it, and I got to a point in the story where it just stopped and I couldn't figure it out. And I said, well, I'll go back to it. I'll come back. I came back about 2 weeks later, couldn't do it. And I said, great, at 46, I've got performance issues now. So I was like, I'll go back to it. And then I couldn't do it. So I go and start another story. Couldn't do that either. And I was like, wow, I think I'm done. And then I was really questioning myself because I'm like, okay, the stories are not hitting me like they used to. There's no water in the well, so to speak. And I was just pretty much I'd quit because I didn't think I had it anymore. And then I ran into your post and I was like, wait a minute, no, I got this. I've got this. And I
We
went
got to
back
pull
to
you back in here. Yeah, come on.
right when I thought I was out, you pulled me back in.
Nice,
Uh,
nice.
and I saw it. And I remember sending you that message. I was like, man, thanks, because you really saved my writing career because I was done. I'd already just packed up everything was
Wow,
done.
wow. I'm honored. I'm really honored because I do really appreciate your work, and
Yeah.
I
And
think you're a needed voice.
ever since that post of yours, everything's starting to come back faster like
Wow,
it used to.
really,
I'm
really
writing a novel for 2026 right now about a hunter.
nice. Nice
So
to hear that.
it's come
Wow.
back. And
Oh, that's
that's
terrific.
yeah. And it was all because of you and your post.
Oh, that's great.
No
A
joke.
social
No
media
joke.
post, right? So
Mm-hmm.
here we are bashing on phones, and right, and
I know it. God, I know it. But technology's good if you let it assist you the right way. Because
yes,
we were
yes.
talking the other night about AI and writing, and one of my friends was like, "What do you think about it?" And I was like, when you look at AI when it comes to writing, it's a good assisting tool. Grammar,
Sure.
stuff like that. It's a great assisting tool. Now, I've used AI in my books just for the synopsis, for the back of the book, because I cannot describe a book. But what I'll do is
Those are
once I finish
difficult.
it,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it really is. I'm glad I'm not the only one because I can't do it. Because if you
That's
want
the
me to
hardest
describe a
part.
book,
You have a finished book. Now, how do I summarize it on the back of a book and sell it? Yeah.
in 50 words or less, tell me what this book is about.
Wow.
I can tell you in about 500 words or less what the book's about. So what I do is I go to AI, I tell them what the book is about, the characters, the tone, stuff like that, and I said I want it under about 50 words, and the AI will come up with a description. Well, I don't like that. Let's try again. You'll come up with another description, and so on and so forth. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll just pick certain sentences out of each one and kind of mash them together and then maybe put my own spin on it. That to me is great. That's what AI is for. It's an assist. But I'm afraid that you've got writers out there now who are saying, here's an idea that I have, here's the characters, here's the plot. I want you to write it, but I want it to be 100,000 words and I'm going to stick my name on it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's happening already. Literary presses are getting submissions, and
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's not right. Because think
No.
about this. What keeps when times start getting tighter, what keeps a big publisher from saying, okay, we got to start watching our money. So let's kick out, 60% of our writers that we pay money to, that we don't make a lot on. We'll get ideas. We'll have AI write it. We'll throw a name on it, and every bit of the profit comes to us.
You have an AI generated photograph of the author on the back, and
Right.
that's it. Yeah. Yeah. It's
What's
easy.
stopping them? And
Yeah.
maybe they're doing it now. We just don't know it. I don't know. I
Could
mean, but
be. Yeah.
there's nothing stopping them. And people are not going to know the difference because they're too busy speed reading. They're too busy just trying to hurry through. They're not getting it. So I
Yeah.
really see that in the next maybe 10 to 20 years, that becoming really a big thing.
Yeah.
Because when AI figures out how to get the soul of the speaker and the
That's what it
narrator,
is. It's missing that right now. But if
yeah,
it does, if it is able, do you think it will be able to though? I don't know. I
I do.
question.
I
You think it
do.
will?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you
Oh,
look at what
that's the
AI has
scary
done
part.
now. It is. I say that because look at what AI has done now that we didn't think it could do.
Yeah.
It's going to evolve. It's going to happen. Eventually, you're going to have a. I mean, how unique is your voice and my voice? Okay, but you look at on a planet where there's what 8 billion people, you're going to have some overlaps of unique voices. Everybody's going to start sounding the same at some point. And if AI can tap into that and start writing with like a Faulkner or a Hemingway, a hybrid, nobody's ever seen anything like that before. Who's to say that that doesn't happen? So I think it's dangerous for writers, but for writers like King who are on the back end of his career,
It doesn't
it's
matter.
not an encroachment. Yeah, it's not an encroachment on his territory because he's out the door anyway
Yeah,
with
exactly.
his career.
Yeah, to be
So,
honest.
yeah. But for people coming up, you're having to deal with an AI system that's probably going to write 100 times better than you will, and will eventually get this a unique voice to go along with that writing style.
So are we
Because
talking
AI,
maybe 5 years, a 5 year window, maybe where
I mean,
5 to 10.
I would think. I mean, maybe you always look at the long game, 5 to 20, but man, I don't know. As fast as things go up now, who's to say that it's not 5 years, 2 years? I don't know. 20 is going to be a different. I think literary stuff in 20 years, it's going to be much different than it is now. We're going to look at these days as the good old days.
Oh wow.
As far as book, I believe it.
Yeah. Right now, AI cannot duplicate what you or I do in our books.
No,
It cannot do that. It doesn't
no,
have the spirit.
no, not yet. And that's
And
the
not
thing that's saving us. But I think it will, and that's what I think's scary.
yeah,
Is because
that's
once it grabs that, what do? You're competing now against a machine, and you're not
oh
going to win. Yeah, you're not going to win.
that's a changed world. Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, I mean, but I like AI as an assisting tool because I really think it has its place. Um, because I've had a really good back and forth with the AI that I use um, doing the synopsis stuff, and it kind of feels like you're Tony Stark, with Jarvis going through stuff. But man, the stuff that you could do with it with medical technology, curing diseases, going through all this stuff. Man, there's a lot that AI can do, but how much are we going to allow it to do? That's my worry. How much are we going to allow AI to do?
Yeah.
Because are we going to get so lazy to where we just back off and let the AI take care of it, and we just kind of go back to doing whatever we want to do? I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea.
Did you take any classes? Have you ever taken a
No,
writing? So
no.
you're a completely self-trained writer.
Yep. Yeah,
Amazing.
never took one writing class. I remember we had to come up with a creative writing thing in my junior year of high school, and Miss Wolf she was a brand new teacher at her high school, and she gave us certain subjects, and then there were certain people that she let write whatever. And she's like, "Well, what do you want to write?" And I was like, "I'll I'll write a story about a guy that digs his prom date up out of the grave." And I think I included that one in the first collection.
Nice.
And she read it and she was like, "This is really good." I was like, "Thanks." She's like, "You may have something one day." And I was like, "Thanks." So, but no, I didn't take any writing class. I
Wow.
didn't know really if I was even doing it. I think the more I've written, the better I've gotten because I can definitely see the evolution. But no, I never took any writing classes or anything like that. That always intimidated me
Wow.
because
Yeah.
I never thought I was good enough anyway. So I was like, no, because that would diminish my confidence. So I'd always do it in the shadows, and write and create and, write notebooks full of stuff. So no, I never took any classes.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, there's so many. There's about almost 1,000 MFA graduates every year in this country. And
Mm-hmm.
some of them graduate and they're going right to the insurance office, or they're becoming they're going to do different jobs, and
Right.
they're not. That's fine if they do that and then they still publish, because anybody can write a book in any field of work, right? You don't have to be a professor, you don't have to be even a full-time writer to still
Mm-hmm.
write. There's many
Right.
people that do that. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem I see is that they graduate from these expensive programs and then they go out there and they give up writing. They leave it behind. they're
Yeah.
working at coffee shops or whatever they're doing, but they're not actually doing what they went to school for. And I think that's just so sad. And they're indebted too. They owe a lot of money.
And that's the trap, because I've always said if you're going to go to school, you better do something that you know that when you get out that you can do it and pay your debt off, because school is so expensive.
It is.
I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, I know so many people that when they get out of school, they look at their student loan debt and they're like, man, what am I going to do? And then they're not even doing what they graduated and got a degree in,
Right.
which makes it even worse for them. So, and that sucks for them. But when I was in college, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I didn't. I went to college because I thought that was what you were supposed to do. I mean, this is late 90s. So I graduated in 97, took a year off, and then I went to college and I stayed 3 years, and I was like, what am I doing? Because
What did
when
you
you get
study
in,
during that time? Did you just take random classes that were
yeah, I was
core
going to
classes?
be a counselor. That was my
Oh,
goal, was to
wow.
get into
Okay.
psychology. Yeah, because I like the human condition so
Yeah,
much.
you got the emotion. Yeah, exactly. So,
So that was my goal. But the longer I got into it, I was just like, I didn't have that drive anymore. So I was like, before I accrue any more debt, I probably need to step out and then just do something else, because college wasn't it. And I wanted to write, and for part of me was like, you got to go to college to learn how to write. But hell, I already knew how to write. I was
yeah,
writing
yeah.
papers, and they were like, "These are really good." I was like, "Thanks," but I mean, it didn't sharpen me any. But I loved going to college. It was great. I liked college better than I did high school, because when you go to college, I remember our sociology professor. He came in, and the very first day, it was my very first day of college, and he says, "We've already got your money. If you want to show up, that's great. If you don't, that's great too." And I was like, "Wow, this is a new ball game.
This is different. Yeah.
It's on me now."
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah.
But I did, I liked it. But no, I dropped out of college. I think right, probably about 3/4 of my junior year, I was done.
Wow. Okay.
I just didn't have it
That was it.
anymore.
You just didn't feel it anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know?
Right. Yeah, grades were there. It's just I
Yeah.
just was like, life got in the way,
Yeah.
got married, kids came, and then I was just
Mhm.
like, really, what am I doing anymore? So you start transitioning from early 20s, college life, and you start transitioning over to married suburban life, and that pendulum swings that way for a while. So you learn a lot in your 20s. You
For
learn a lot
sure.
in your 30s, but when you get to your 40s, you should be old enough to know better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't
The
always
clock is
work out that
ticking.
way. Well, I was telling one of my friends the other day. I was like, I look at life like, when you're born up until like you're 19, that's the spring. That's the spring season. You're growing, everything's in bloom, you're going good. And you get in your 20s and 30s, that's like the summertime. You get in your 40s and 60s, that's fall.
Yeah.
Here comes the
It
winter.
sure is. Yeah.
And if you make it past 80, that's the long winter. So
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
kind of depressing when you think about
It
that.
is.
But
It is. I have a couple of poems about
yeah,
that.
but you look at the way the seasons change, especially here in the South. I mean, sometimes we have all four seasons in one week.
True. Yeah.
But you look at the seasons traditionally, and they do mimic stages of life.
They do. Yeah.
And I really find that fascinating. Just when you look at fall and you look at winter, and then you come back into spring and summer, and it's a cycle. And we're all cyclical, and I don't think people look at that a lot, because everybody's looking at their phones now. They're too
Yeah. Yeah.
they don't look
Removed
at it,
from
they don't
nature.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't appreciate what we appreciated growing up. And when we
Yeah.
grew up, I think we had better appreciation of things. I mean, we had games and movies, but man, we were still out there riding bikes.
Ah, yeah. We were out there outside in the neighborhood, right?
Yes, out there playing wiffle ball in the street. You would move when a car came through, then you just come back.
And that's the same no matter what region of the country. I grew up in the Northeast. you grew up in the South, right?
Mhm.
So that's that people and the kids in the West, no matter where you were, that's the way it was back then. It's
Right.
so different now.
And it's like almost like when you talk about it to the younger generation, I know we probably sound like the people from the Depression era trying to tell us what it was like kicking cans down the street for fun because we weren't interested in that.
No, no, crazy
It's
old
like,
people.
yeah, what do you know, old man?
Yeah.
That's how we were, but now we're the old men and we're like,
We're the old
wow,
ones. Yeah.
that's what they mean.
So Home Again is your first novel, right?
Yeah, yeah, first
And
official, first published one. Yeah.
and it sounds like you went through, how many people do you rely on for readers? You have that one editor that you go to?
What I did was is the first editor that I used on Home Again. That book, I liked that book a lot, but it was so hard to get to going because me and the editor did not get along very well on it. It was just a bad match.
Wow, really?
It was terrible, and it's not that she didn't do a good job. She did a great job, but we were just not on the same page on anything. And it was really hard for me to convey to her what I was trying to get through, and vice versa. So it was a bad match, and we were just glad to get away from each other after the book was done. Um, the next book, I've used the same editor as the one I've got in this latest book, so it's been a lot more transitional because I can call and say, "Hey, what do you think about this scene? Does it need to be taken out?" Or they'll call and say, "Hey, I don't like this scene. You might want to change it up a little bit," and then we'll talk about it. And I'm not really wedded to any scenes in my book unless I think they're just super, super important. But the editor will come up and say, maybe change it, maybe cut it back a little bit. And she usually has a lot of really good ideas on how to make things better because some editors you have to be careful with. And I have found the difference between my first one and this one is that they'll read a book and say, well, this is how I would do it. Well, you're not writing the book.
That's yeah. Good point. Yeah. Yeah.
So I need to know what you're going to suggest that will help the book, not what you would do. There's a big difference there because if I read a book, I can say, okay, here, I got a great idea. Let's take this out and add this. Does that really help the book? It helps my book if I'm writing it, but if I'm an editor and I'm looking at somebody else's, I'm like, okay, here's how I can help you strengthen this idea. Here's how I can help you fix this part, not completely change it into something in my own image. And that's some editors are like that I've come across. The first one was this new one that's been with me for the last 4 books. She's been great. Total difference because we have a really good communication on what we want to, what she's trying to do for my work, which helps because she's not trying to tear it apart. She'll say, well, let's strengthen this area, maybe scale back here, maybe might not need that. So that makes it better, I think.
I think we talked a lot about today about the your influences and
Mm-hmm.
your process. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we're gonna have to come back for a part two to talk about the books. I think we should get into the books a little deeper in a different session, but I'd love to just go through the ones I have here
Yeah,
quickly, and
yeah, we do it.
and then I think let's dive a little deeper some other time in them, definitely,
Yeah,
because I think I have a lot of questions too about as we could pull from some of those questions.
yeah,
The first book, Home Again,
yeah.
right? So uh, tell us a little bit about this book.
Okay, what that book is about a man's choice on what he has done. Because if you look, we've all made choices in our life, and we were just talking about being in our 40s. This is the time where we should be reaping everything that we sowed in the spring and the summer. Well, what if you sowed everything that was bad and now you're reaping all the losses? That's what this book is about because he's a world famous writer. He's got a good family, but he didn't really care about it like he should have because his mind's everywhere else on regret and stuff like that. So that book focuses a lot on regret, things he should have done, things he wasn't doing, wasn't paying attention to his wife, his son Davy is spiraling into a depression. His daughter is in behind the scenes going to get married to a high school sweetheart. So you run into a lot of that in that book, and he's just not seeing it. It's like the detective's curse. The answer was right in front of his face the whole time, but he didn't care. And I think that's an allegory to most people out there. They see something, they don't see it, but it's right there in their face. And I think Home Again is one of those. I think it's one of those important stories for dads to look at and say, hey, sometimes you need to take care of your house. You've got to take care of your own people that you're living with because they depend on you for something. And if you're neglectful, it domino affects everybody else because your actions in a family have repercussions for everybody else. And you see that really clear in this book.
I have to say, I was afraid to read it, but I am
Real
so
wow.
glad. I am so glad I did because, like you said, it is. It really. I did consider it as as a real reminder of the best things in life. The really
Yeah,
just like not that you need to be reminded. Well, I mean, maybe you do sometimes though. There's
I
things
do.
the greatest things you love in life. I think there's always it's always nice to have a reminder. So I felt like that was it's a really important book for that reason alone. But it was an enjoyable read and it was full of surprises. So like I said, we're gonna come back to that and talk
Yeah,
about that a little bit more some other time. What
yeah.
was the second book after that?
The second book was a collection called Scarecrows and Shadows.
Yes. So that's the next one here
That one.
that we have. So this one I have started. I
Yeah.
have not finished it. I'll say that the first
Yeah.
story was amazing.
Which
Is
one was it? Was it that
and
summer?
the very first story here is Hudson's Woods. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Great.
I felt like this was a movie. This was something. Have you ever thought about just expanding this into novella or something a little bit?
Almost. Almost.
Almost, yeah, because
It was close.
oh, good. Yeah, it's wow, what a story there. That was I'm still unsure about the ending, how I feel about that. But I know you were saying earlier about something where it's right for the book,
Yeah.
right for the story maybe. And it's difficult to deal with, but even as a reader and
Yeah.
probably especially as a writer, but sometimes you just got to go with it, I guess, right?
Well, in that story, you're dealing with a heavy, heavy subject. You're dealing with a guy that is a child rapist, and these kids are 14. They're making a full-on adult decision that they're going to take this guy out, and they're going to bury him in the woods, and they know we're going to know about it. That's a heavy thing to do as a 14-year-old kid. And then you're dealing with the fallout when you get to be an adult, going back and say, we did the right thing, but now there's a gray area because I don't know how we feel about it. And it affects them all different ways. And that's what I was really interested in. You're taking something that should be black and white, but there's going to be a gray area in there because you did it so young. And now you're an adult and you're thinking back, okay, why does this feel weird? And I really wanted to capture that. Why are we having this why are we having this issue if we knew we did the right thing?
People love stories about the secret too, that they have this mutual secret. I've thought about a
Yeah.
story. What can I tell? What kind of story can I tell about myself and some college friends and the kind of a murder like that? Murder would be perfect, something like that. But yeah, this was yeah. The boys in this, I think, were heroes. I think they did the right thing,
I think so too.
difficult
Yeah.
as it was. Yeah,
Because it was hard. It was very hard to write.
yeah.
It was very hard to write because the scene where the I think it was the narrator is in the woods and he hears what's going on, and it just jars him so much that he knows he's got to do something. And it's just, some people may say, well, that, they would go with the police, whatever. But you got to think about it. You're 14 years old. You just witnessed something just horrific. I don't know. Maybe you get into a different kind of drive thinking about it that you need to do something quick. And it was a difficult story to write. Very difficult to write. Didn't know if I could do it, but I think I pulled it off pretty well.
I bet. Well, what was the third book after that?
Third book was the novel Maple Lane. That's the one where the kid gets killed out in the street playing, and it just divides up the entire family. What's good about that book is at that time that it's going on with the Downey family, there's a kid whose dad has a heart attack, and he dies at like 40 something years old. So it leaves the kid without a father. So he moves to the town where the Downeys just had their kid killed. The main character is a high school guidance counselor, and he's dealing with his son being dead. Well, this kid has just moved into town in his dad's old house that he grew up in, and he becomes a student at the school. And the guidance counselor and this kid kind of start forming a bond, a trauma bond, because they're both dealing with their losses with each other. So I thought
So
that is my favorite story.
really, yeah. That one's been in my cart, and I'm hesitant to. It's another story I'm scared of reading, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it.
I like it.
It sounds like yeah. It sounds like I will.
I
What
think
was
yeah.
what was next after that one?
Next after that was Everything Fades in Time. It was another short collection.
Yep, I
Yeah.
have that one here. So we're gonna get to that next. It's on my summer reading list. So
Yeah, I think you'll like that one. I like short stories a lot because you can get your idea across pretty quick and be done in a short amount of time. When I did that one, there's some really good stories in there. Probably not so many good stories in there, but as a writer, I want to show you everything. I don't want to hold back because even the bad stories have good lessons in them. Because somebody may look at one of the bad stories and say, I would have done it this way or that way. And it may influence somebody later. So I
I like
don't
that
leave out.
philosophy. I like that. Yeah.
I did in the first short story collection, I wrote a romance, a teen romance, because I didn't know if I could do it and I wanted to try it. And it was called Strawberry Chapstick. And it was about this vacation town that these two kids meet at. They're like 13, and they just have this really just undeniable chemistry. And I explore that because a similar thing happened to me. And then, like, right as they're starting to talk and get to know each other a little bit more, one of the kids has to leave. And that's the last they see of each other because this is like 1991. You didn't have phones or social media. So when you left, that was it. It's a very good story. I always try to write multi-genre stories because I think if you write multi-genre stories, it keeps your mind sharp. Because you can stay in the horror or you can stay in the dramatic, but I'd like to try to weave in now to try to get a better flow of it. Because I think if I do that, I'm a better writer. Maybe I'm not.
Yeah, I like that philosophy too. I like that. Yeah. It's interesting for the writer too to explore different parts of themselves.
Yeah, because I think, Strawberry Chapstick, I didn't know if I could write a teen romance because I was like, okay, let's try it. Because, I mean, it kind of happened to me growing up in that situation. I was like, I wonder if I can pull the feeling out of it. But when I know that if I've got emotional scenes, I go through my music catalog and I try to, because I love music, and I try to find the right song to how I would feel, if I'm watching a movie and they play that song in the background because you're going to get that emotion. I'm like, I need to find the song. So I will play the song, loop it, and I will write that scene and see if I can feel it. Because usually if I can feel the emotion, I can get it on paper.
Nice. I'm a big fan of soundtracks too. I really think we're brothers from another
Me
mother.
too. I think maybe we've got to be because soundtracks, man, I did a thing on Facebook. I was like, what's the soundtrack to your life? And man, I said, you could put 20 songs on a soundtrack that define your life. And man, there were so many people that responded to that because music, where you were when you first heard your favorite song, right? What's your favorite all-time song?
Oh, ooh, favorite all-time song. That's tough. That's
It's very tough.
I have a lot. I do have a soundtrack of life though. I definitely have. I don't know if I could pick one song from it though, but
Yeah.
I actually did this as a college assignment for my students. I used to do
Really? That was
Yeah,
that
then
was
write the soundtrack of your life and annotate each one. Tell a little something about. Was it more of a narrative exercise in my writing
yeah,
class? Yeah.
man, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
It's great.
They were fun for me to read, yeah, and share my own too. That was fun as
Yeah,
well.
because I remember the very first song. My favorite song of all time is "Losing My Religion," and I'll never forget where I heard that song for the very first time. And I was like, man, every time I hear it, I've heard it a million times, and it always takes me back to that one place every time.
Nice. I think
Yeah.
we could have a whole episode just on soundtracks.
Oh man, that would be totally awesome, dude. We could do
we
that.
we should plan that. Well, we're gonna do this again. So Matthew
Absolutely.
McConkey, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Man, thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Yeah, yeah. Let's get together and talk a little bit more about your books in depth. We'll dive a little deeper, and we'll do this soon.
Yeah, we
Thanks so
will.
much.
Absolutely. All right, thanks, man.